Codependency is one of those terms that evades clear understanding from the majority. It's really become a meme with a shallow meaning. As it is prevalent socially, practically universal, it needs to be given depth and clarity. If you ask someone in an offhanded way to define it, the response is usually, oh, well, this or that person takes more care of the other than themselves. The implication is that one person has a problem. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Moreover, what is this problem really anyway? We have to revisit dependency disorder. The disorder results from unmet dependency needs in infancy and early childhood. This has left the individual in a permanent state of exaggerated neediness, in a psychological set of symptoms that act as compensatory measures to counteract survival threat. Primal anxiety and insecurity are the result of physiological fight and flight. The individual has not experienced authentic safety for its existence, and the traumatic syndrome now dominates altered perceptions and responses to the environment. This state of exaggerated autopilot neediness expresses in two ways psychologically. The most common and therefore superficially observed by society is in an individual externalizing his neediness onto the other. This is due to the fact that during the critical years of the dependency bridge, the individual was not having those needs met properly and fully, and rather than sensing that the environment could not ensure its survival, he compensates by assuming care of the environment. If he himself is in control of the need of the environment to be stable for him, then he ensures the safety for himself. So he caretakes the environment flawlessly. He is co-caretaking, rather than not facing that the parent cannot meet his dependency needs. He co-caretakes the parent in a compensatory measure, guaranteeing that the parent can therefore caretake him. He allows the parent to be dependent on him for adult needs, often fundamentally emotional needs, and he is codependent with that parent. This is done on an unconscious level, for the child is pre-literal, meaning not fully operating from logic yet, which begins to happen at around age 6. This becomes the template for all future relationships. But on a more subtle level, the codependent also demands more from any given relationship, which seems like an oxymoron. It is not. Since neediness is at the heart of codependency, the codependent presents as the victim. The codependent will invariably become resentful of the lopsided role of caretaking another's needs before his own, but the dynamic remains unchanged as long as the victim is able to extract the emotional food of guilt from the other. As long as there is energetic balance, the dynamic will remain, whether it is healthy balance or unhealthy balance. Therefore, the other side of the coin is the other who is willing to partake in a codependent relationship, allowing the other to caretake him, her. And for the sake of clarity in this argument, we will use the female gender to be the recipient in the relationship of the caretaking. So her relationship is with a male that is the codependent. She unconsciously agrees to this arrangement from her neediness that has arisen out of her broken dependency bridge. So she may do the taking in the relationship, but then has the penalty to pay of the victim's guilt, her male spouse. She agrees to be his tyrant. As long as there is energetic equilibrium, both agree unconsciously, and often the dynamic blurs where one is the victim and the other is the tyrant. Guilt is a powerful weapon of tyranny. Even though we have just clarified it is the emotional tool of the victim, obviously, we generally agree socially that a tyrant has power over a victim. The tyrant is known as the one who abuses his power over another. But the tyrant has agreed to be the recipient of the victim's guilt. And as will be discussed in the next video, toxic guilt disables authentic emotional growth of an individual. So, who really has control in this relationship? The victim or the tyrant? And so we arrive at the ultimate paradox of human nature that I choose to define simply as narcissism. Shakespeare once said, "Neither a lender nor a borrower be." And Shakespeare only spoke truths about human nature. Either side of that equation leaves the other beholden to the first, no matter which way you turn this psychological Rubik's Cube. Of course, we are not talking about people here who are healthy and whole. We are talking about the damaged. There is perverse power on either side of this coin. The idea is not to be a part of that currency exchange at all, for there will always be a price on both heads. This brings us back to the golden word, independence. Everything I have spoken about in these videos is describing the event that results in a perpetual state of emotional dependency. What brings narcissists to his knees, unable to psychologically locate Echo, is the state of being unable to experience intimacy with her. This drives him to despair, where he can only see himself, that compensatory neediness I have described. A reflection of himself is all that he can see, not his true self, his whole and independent self, but a shallow, hollow, and superficial image of what he thinks he is, for it is an illusion that his reflection is any true representation. Echo is driven mad with longing, but it is for a man lost, looking at the illusion of himself. She herself is in the illusion that she can have herself heard to him, for she cannot speak in a way that is not broken, under halting, under punishment from her mother god Juno, who herself is without her independence. For she seeks to justify her existence through her mirror with her husband, who is off having sex with other women. Echo cannot hear herself for herself, and Narcissus cannot see himself for himself. Each is dependent on the illusion that if they come together as two broken pieces, they can make each other whole. This is the pathology that besets mankind, and the ageless myth reminds us of the danger that occurs as our essential brokenness is avoided. We forever linger in the river Styx, neither fully living nor fully dead, but feeding off others for our unmet dependency needs. The feeding is vampiric. It is not the natural state of man. It is man in his devolution. It is man in his fall. When the light within us has not been fully lit, or is out altogether, then mankind becomes a thief of life to himself, forever looking for that light some call God outside himself. By nature of the definition of spiritual freedom, this cannot be bought, nor borrowed, nor stolen, nor illusioned. Freedom dies to dependency, and spirituality is born from freedom. Freedom is never something physical, any more than illusions are. Narcissism, therefore, is the expression of the inability to be emotionally, mentally, and spiritually independent. It is the expression of the state of dependency or imprisonment. Narcissism explains human pathology, how it is inextricably bound to the experience of trauma. There may be a myriad of words for myriads of symptoms in today's world, but if you think about it, as the ancients surely did, there need be only one way to describe the human wound that leads to the emotional river of death. Indigenous peoples aptly call this spirit sickness. Now I ask, as we are told there was once a paradise where we could stand naked in front of our God, what caused the trauma that called man to lust and greed instead of toward that God, and to the pathology of wickedness instead? Religion breeds dependency, while spirituality, as all wise men know, is the only road to freedom. In either theological or psychological terms, real freedom can only come from true inner independence. In closing, we know every tyrant needs a victim. But when will we admit to ourselves that indeed every victim needs a tyrant? So I ask, in a world beset by tyrannical overlords, how do we really set ourselves free? The option, a third way of being, is not part of the narrative offered, not served up in our global dialectic. So I say to you now, neither a victim nor a tyrant be.